Welcome to Talk is Sheep, the official podcast of the Wild Sheep Society of British Columbia. Brought to you by our title sponsor, Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. Come along with us as we take conversations that matter to you into the high alpine. We have partnered with Mountain Tough Fitness Lab to help get you in shape and mentally stronger. Whether you're a veteran hunter or just starting out, the Mountain Tough app will take you to the next level. We personally train using the Mountain Tough programs, and we believe in it so much that we want to give you 6 weeks for free using code SHEEPBC. That's SHEEPBC. Check out Mountain Tough Fitness Lab. You won't be disappointed. This episode is sponsored by our conservation partner, Yeti. Thank you, Sitka Gear and Yeti, for investing in healthy wildlife and sustainable ecosystems. Well, good afternoon, I guess, / evening for you out there on the East Coast, Chad, and welcome to the Talk is Sheep podcast. Great to see you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So we've been trying to put this together for a little bit here, and you came up with a couple excuses, which I thought were pretty legitimate. There's some pretty serious storms on the East Coast there, and you've been hit with 2 hurricanes back to back. So, yeah, everything went okay. Everything all right in your neck of the woods. How do you guys fare through all that?
Yeah, unfortunately, these 2 Gulf storms. I live oceanfront in the Gulf, so we did take quite a bit of damages. And the storms, the community in general is recovering right now. Still, 2 back to back in 2 weeks is unprecedented, and it left a lot of people, without homes and really just trying to rebuild. So, the dust has settled a bit now, and it's just more, cleanup efforts and trying to restore as much normalcy as possible. But fortunately, everybody's safe, and we just take her one day at a time. Kind of like sheep hunting, one step at a time.
Well said. Well, I'm glad to hear everyone's okay and that you guys did survive it. And it was interesting. We literally had this one scheduled the day the first one hit, and you were a no-show, rightfully so. And right away we're like, okay, we know what's going on the East Coast. So you didn't, and then you reached out a couple days later. We just left you alone, and you reached out and said, "Hey guys, so sorry. Let's try and reschedule." But shoot, there's another one right behind it here. So
yeah,
thanks for making this a priority. I'm glad to hear you're safe. Now, from a perspective, year over year, would you say this is one of the worst years you guys have seen, or is it just kind of par for the course for the Gulf?
I don't know. It's just the last few years, it seems like we've just been having more activity than normal. We've had about 5 storms in 15 months that we've had some level of impact here. So, yeah, I mean, I've been here for 10 years now, and it's definitely been more active than normal that I would like to see. But I guess that's what you sign up for. If you live anywhere on the coast in Florida, you may be signing up for a hurricane in your future. So you just got to go into it eyes wide open, I suppose, and have a plan.
Yeah, like you said, it's like sheep hunting, right? So
yeah. Roll with the punches.
Yeah,
it's
very
like my
cool.
motto for sheep hunting.
Well, I like it. Yeah, and it served you well for sure. So Chad, there's a lot of stuff we're going to jump into today, and obviously one of the big ones that's happened recently is you finished up your finals and your slam there, and in the face of adversity, and it's been a multi-year and multi-trip journey for you. So we want to talk a little bit about that. But before we kind of dive into that, let's just talk a little bit about who Chad Hall is and kind of your early days and what got you into hunting, and more specifically, I guess, mountain hunting, the adventure side of things.
Yeah. I grew up in Michigan, so fairly flat land. I didn't grow up with the type of outdoor activities that would make me think about going sheep hunting. You start with small game, and then at that time, now there's a lot better youth programs and stuff, but we couldn't start, archery hunting until we were 12. So, you kind of worked up to hunter safety to see you could do your first deer hunt at 12. And that's when it kind of started from there. Hunting was a big thing growing up. A lot of the kids did it. I didn't live in the true country, like in the farming areas of the country, but I lived far enough outreach of the city there that we did, have quite a bit of outdoor availability of things to do growing up. And so, we started out with archery hunting, and then that blossomed into doing some rifle hunting and things like that. And, I was pretty diehard. Like I loved it. I would do it every weekend during the season. So it wasn't like something I would periodically do. Um, and that passion just kind of kept growing and building over the years. And my family hunted, but they weren't. None of them had really done any big game hunting, other side of deer hunting, stuff local. And I got involved in safari club and things like that. Which actually a lot of that came through, me going through cancer, which we'll probably talk about. And my big game started small. Michigan, you're close to Canada, so we would go, black bear hunting when you get a tag in Michigan, or we'd go to Canada and black bear hunt. We'd go up and hunt caribou in Quebec, and that kind of really started the passion for some of the other big game. And then in college, I did a little bit of elk hunting out in Colorado, and really just started getting the itch to do some bigger things. And I think if anybody who doesn't have a family that's done some of that bigger stuff, you got to start making a little bit of money before you can go on the more extravagant hunts. And as I, got through college and building my professional career and had the available funds, I started going on more exotic stuff, and starting to travel around the world a little bit more to go on some of these dream hunts. And I've been fortunate to do that. But sheep hunting was one that I would say was definitely one of the sparks to get me into doing a lot more worldly travel for big game. That's about as adventurous as it comes, right? And I think you start to really broaden your imagination after you've been on a few sheep hunts, and it starts kind of taking you all over the place.
So there's this growing up in Michigan and just sort of, whitetail hunting and sort of, flatland hunting, obviously great bird hunting, all that kind of stuff. And then was it that trip to Colorado that got you when you on that first elk hunt, or was it sort of when you started doing, kind of getting outside your comfort zone? And so was it like the experience of being in the mountains that first time that kind of said, oh, I want to do more of this? Or was it just when you kind of went beyond the borders, maybe came into Canada, did some black bear hunting, or just, was it the adventure itself, or was it the mountains that were calling, or I guess a combination there of both, maybe?
Yeah, I think it's a culmination of all of it. But I mean, I guess I never really thought about it. But as you say that, definitely the being in the mountain, living out of a backpack, like the whole adventure survival aspect, that's more than just going and staying in a camp, has a lot of appeal for me. So I really like that aspect of it, because the hunt's more than, I think when you stay in a lodge and all that stuff's great, but the hunt is different.
Mm-hmm.
And that aspect of planning and living in that environment is it adds to it to me. Like I have as much fun prepping for these hunts as I do going on them,
Right.
and getting ready. So yeah, I think that some of those early mountain hunts definitely had an influence on that. Um, but as I started really kind of getting the bug for bigger game hunting in general, I kind of just started like, I want to go on everything. I want to go on every experience, every kind of hunt possible. And so I really just tried to build that into my life, and, go on as many trips as I could throughout the years.
One thing I would lastly touch on here is you talked about the adventure aspect of it, and you talked about these exotic hunts and doing stuff overseas and international hunting. And, there's the Africa experience, and there's like the dangerous game aspect, right? So grizzly bear hunting,
Yeah.
brown bear, but then also going to Africa and hunting, dangerous game over there. Is that a big draw for you? Again, is it about, I guess it's more so about the adventure and,
Hmm.
and the experience, not necessarily, because I want to talk about pushing yourself too. And I know that
Yeah.
you got lots of experience in that realm, but I just kind of want to get your frame of mind around why you're out pursuing and what's drawing you out there.
Yeah, I mean, I've done all the big game hunting in Africa, all the dangerous game, and yeah, there's something about not knowing and not being able to control what's going on is part of the adventure. It's like it's just you don't, when I said roll with the punches, it literally is, it's unpredictable, right? And, being able to just prepare yourself for those trips. And part of the adventure is the fact that you lose control, when people are so focused on planning and that everything goes the way that they expect it. That's great and all, but there's some part of the adventure that wouldn't be the adventure if it didn't turn out the way that you wanted it to, right? And being able to adapt and really, embrace that and conquer it and make the best out of it. I think that goes into a lot of what you will probably talk about my past and the struggles that I've been through. It's like, if you don't embrace the struggles, and I think you guys always say this, and the guides say it, like the type 2 suck. Like, if you can't find somehow joy in those struggles, then some of the stuff's just not for you, right? And I think a lot of people in life that are self-made, that have found success in anything, have had to learn how to embrace that suck in order to
Yeah.
be successful. It's just the way it is. And when you're programmed that way, and when your mind works that way, like you just want to sign up for tough things. I don't know what it is. I think that's that screw that you get loose coming a sheep hunter. It's like the reason I booked my first sheep hunt, to give myself the toughest possible challenge I could, given the circumstance I was in when I was, having my leg operated on for the second time from bone cancer. It's like, when doctor was worried about me walking, not going on a sheep hunt. So, here I am, like, motivation. I want to book it. Never been on a sheep hunt. I hear it's the toughest hunt you can go on. I'm going to book that. That's my motivation to go through therapy. And that's how my sheep hunting came to be. Was my first sheep hunt was that exactly. I was on my, just for a quick rewind, and we have to go all the way back, but, I was diagnosed with bone cancer when I was 19. Had my femur, my knee, my tibia replaced due to the cancer, a couple years of chemotherapy, and I successfully beat cancer. Well, when you put prosthesis inside your body, they didn't necessarily last forever. And this was, now 25 years ago, right? 45 now, turned 20 when that happened. And, experimental type surgeries, the way that they would normally do the surgery is just take your leg off. And, I signed up for that particular surgery and made it through it, and was very fortunate. And, you fast forward from that point 10 years later, and I had to have the surgery done again. Talk about, had your life disrupted for such a period of time, to go back down in the dumps and get dealt of, hey, we're going to do the surgery again. Cancer didn't come back, but just, having to be physically impaired again. And so that's when I decided, look, I'm going to book sheep hunt. So instead of sitting there whining and crying about it, I'm like, let me go get myself an even tougher thing to deal with, right? So not only am I going to rehab myself, I'm going to rehab myself to the ability where I can go live in the mountains and carry a backpack with a sheep on it. And, that's what I did. And so what ended up happening is I booked that, I'm telling one of my close friends about it. His name is Jason Brown, and he's in the outdoor film business. And, I've worked with him in filming a lot of stuff. It was just something you did for fun when you were growing up, and when, video cameras and all that became popular, video tape your deer hunt or your whatever hunts. And so I was very familiar with and doing filming and things like that, but not for any sort of production. And so he was like, hey, let's document this. Like, it's just a real cool story. You're going to go through rehab, you're going to train for the sheep hunt. He's like, I'd love to like film it and go on the sheep hunt with you. And so you just have it documented, something you can have for the rest of your life. And then he just happens to be meeting with, the outdoor networks at some of the shows, and he's telling them about me and telling them about what we're going to go do. And, they're interested. They're interested, like, let's make a TV. I'd love to make a TV show out of this. And so, at that time, it was a Sportsman's Channel. It was like, we want to meet Chad. So I went and met with them, and they're like, "We love the story. We'd love for you to make a TV show about this journey." And I was like, "Wow, okay." I was never really thinking about that, but that's awesome, and I'm interested in it. And the challenge with it was, hey, they want you to film 13 episodes. It's like, how am I going to make 13 episodes on one sheep hunt? Like, that seems like a pretty lofty stretch out of one hunt. Um, and a big time commitment, right? I have a career and a business to run and things like that. And like, I'm not going to go on 13 sheep hunts, even though that'd be awesome. Like, that's just not possible.
Yeah.
Not let alone financially possible with what TV dollars look like. And so we left that whole brainstorming session on this idea that I would find 3 other people going through some struggles in their life, and that we would all go on these different hunts, and train together and film these different stories. And so I was able to go and actually hand select some different individuals to go on that journey with me, and that's where Sheep Shape, the TV show, was born. Was built on that basis. 4 diverse stories, all overcoming some obstacle in their life, whether it was life threatening or a disability, and to do it together and tell a story. And it was cool. It was a really cool experience.
Let's just touch a little bit about the journey on the cancer side of things. So you first experienced it, we were 2019. So at that point, did they come to you and say, "Hey, okay, we're going to have to, this is very serious. We're going to have to remove your leg and all this stuff"? Or did they give you the option right away? Did you know right away that there was a possibility for a prosthesis and that you could go through this process and maybe not lose your leg in it?
Yeah, I mean, look, they never know until they go in and do the surgery. When they go in and remove, they biopsy it first, and then they kind of tell you got cancer, and then you've got your options. And for me, I knew going into the major surgery that they were going to put a prosthesis in. I was fortunate that I was done growing. Had I been younger, they would have taken the leg off. Because at that time they didn't really have a way for your leg to lengthen without doing multiple surgeries. And so any of the younger kids that had the same type of cancer that were in the cancer center at that time, they had lost their legs. So that was kind of a bummer, but I was fortunate to qualify for having the replacement surgery done.
Now with you, I'm curious to try and understand the psyche that built who Chad Hall is. Is this something that, you've always been a fighter, you've always been up for challenges your entire life, or did cancer make you who you are today and become this conqueror of all these incredible challenges and rising to the occasion? Talk about your psyche pre-cancer and your mentality and your approach to life as opposed to going through cancer and the challenges and overcoming all the challenges there.
I mean, to some degree, I believe that you're genetically programmed that way. Maybe you can build yourself to be that way, and maybe you just possess it and you build up on it. But I don't recollect such tough situations prior to that molded that. I think it was once you get put into this life or death situation, is it fight or flight? And, are you going to hide under the covers, or are you going to, take it one day at a time, like a marathon, and just keep working? I just think it's just something that you possess deep down, or you don't. But I do think that once you're put in that situation and you learn to overcome those things, and that you were able to do it, it definitely changes your mindset of what you can accomplish moving forward. So I think that having gone through that in the way that I was able to mentally deal with that, knowing that the mental piece was 98% of the battle. Was to get up every day and know that you're going to fight and you're not going to give up. It programs you to be successful in so many different aspects of your life, not just going on a sheep hunt. It's kind of funny. Like I've done the most extreme training possible for sheep hunts to not training hardly at all, and still being able to push through that hunt and be enjoyable because of the mindset. So I mean, it just tells you how much your body can do when you can actually put your mind to it. Now, I wouldn't recommend that you don't train at all to go on a sheep hunt, but keep yourself in relatively kind of good shape. I just didn't need to go over the top with the training. Like when I went on my first sheep hunt, I hired a personal trainer and trained for 9 months. I mean, it was an insane amount of training. That wasn't necessary. Like this last one I went on, I didn't train like that at all. I literally worked more on core and stretching, not doing the crazy miles or anything like that. And I had no issues on the trip whatsoever. I did
Mm.
zero cardio before the trip. So,
Yeah.
and I live in flat land, right? So, um, it's just that aspect mentally. And in the years of doing it, I think you just build up on each one.
Well, and we're talking about sheep shape here, the show, but on the subject of sheep shape, I think there's an element too as we mature, as we get a little bit older. Like when you're young, you want to be fit, you want to be in great shape, but as you get
Hmm.
older, like you can wear out and you get injured too, right? My buddy got messed up last year, and so he was overtraining in some cases, right? So I think there's an element when you get a little bit older, your body can only take so much, and you got to be a little bit strategic about. But like you said, focusing on being good stretching and like being
Hmm.
really limber and being flexible and being able to move as opposed to the cardio, right? Because again, sheep hunting is very rarely about the foot. It's not a foot race generally. Like I guess there's
No.
exceptions, but it's not. You don't have to race there. You just need to get there eventually, right? And get there in
Yeah.
in a safe and controlled fashion. So
Yeah, agree. 100%. It's I think as you get older in general, that core strength and flexibility is more important than anything.
mhm.
And as I've had injuries over the years, some of which have happened on the trips, aggravating certain things where you want to focus on different aspects of how you train. Um, so I've experimented with a lot of different types of training to go on these trips, and um, yeah, I guess it just adapted as your body changes and as you get older.
Yeah, no, for sure. So Chad, I want to talk a little bit about your first experience. So at 19 years old, going through the surgery at 20, um, did you have colleagues there that were going through the same thing that you were? Was there anyone? Did you have a support network of individuals that were going through cancer as well and treatment, or was it solely on your own? You doing your own thing, like in the rehab aspect, or was it just you kind of there on your own with your doctors and your support team going through the surgery and everything?
Yeah, I mean, my mindset was so focused on being that I wasn't very focused on building relationships in the hospital. Um, one of the things that's really tough when you're in those cancer centers is, I mean, some people aren't going to make it, and you know, I don't trying to get yourself too attached to the other patients that are there can leave you a lot of heartbreak. Because a lot of them won't make it, and I'd see that happen with my family. My family was my support center, right? My mom, my dad, my brothers. And they would be in the hospital so much with me, they'd start to build relationships with the other families, right? And then they would be affected by that. These other families would lose their child or whatever. And, it was a big thing to overcome. It just adds more to the mountain that you're trying to emotionally overcome. So, for me, I never let myself get attached emotionally to anyone in the hospital. Like that was a big thing for me. Like stay focused on the prize. The prize for me was to make it through this. Don't get emotionally attached to, others that don't have a very good outcome um, within that. And most of the time we were isolated anyway, so it wasn't like it was real easy to do that.
Hmm.
Um, the bone cancer treatments were pretty intense from a chemotherapy standpoint. So I was always in a private, isolated room. I wasn't in another room ever with any other patients. And then after you did your 4 or 5 days of chemo, they'd send you home, and typically you end up back in the hospital a couple of days later because your blood counts would get too low, and you'd be what they call neutropenic. You'd end up back in the hospital to be monitored. So, and it was like that for the most part for almost 2 years, fairly isolated in nature of what your interaction was with anybody else. You were just concerned about anything. I mean, you had a hard enough time fighting off your own bacteria in your body, let alone trying to be around other people that could bring some sort of illness to you. So it was a fairly isolated struggle, journey, other than your close, immediate family. So that, I mean, that was more I would say that my family was my support system.
Right. Right. So Chad, you talk about, so at 20, you go through the surgery. How long a process did that take? Was it take you 3 years to sort of get back to where you're on your feet and you're like able to go and live life again? How long was that process?
I did whatever I could during those couple years to try to be able to still enjoy the outdoors where I could. The doctors tell you one thing. I kind of looked at it and said, look, I don't know if I'm living to tomorrow. If I can get out in the woods and go deer hunting, I'm going deer hunting. I don't really care. So the first, I would say, let's call it pre-surgery, the first 6 months, were very challenging, to where I couldn't do anything. I was too weak. I couldn't eat, we lost a lot of weight. Like the ability to go do those things wasn't there. And they really didn't want me physically doing a lot until they could, take the cancer out of the bones. Post-surgery, I had a lot of rehab just to kind of get back on my leg and walking and whatnot. But once I was able to start doing that, it kind of just built up strength, day by day. And, at post-surgery, the first hunting season, that came around, when I wasn't in treatment, I definitely was going out to my deer stand. I mean, if I was too weak, I'd have my mom drive me out on a four-wheeler to the tree, like whatever it took, just so I could get up there. And literally the first time that I had an opportunity to get a shot at a buck, I couldn't even pull my bow back. I was too weak. I couldn't even pull, and it wasn't buck fever. It was just I didn't have the strength.
Wow.
And eventually I was able to build up enough strength, to do it, and fortunately harvested a few bucks during the time I was going through cancer. And I'll forget this for the rest of my life, but that first buck that I shot while I was going through chemo treatment, I shot that buck, and I had gotten driven out to the stand in a four-wheeler, but I was so excited that I walked back, to our camp, and halfway through I threw up, because I just, like, physically that was too much for me, but I still was going to do it, to get back and tell everybody. It was a big deal. And I think you just start building momentum, and as you start to see light at the end of the tunnel, you just get through it. And so, didn't do a lot of other things during that time. A lot of it was isolated, being in the outdoors. I wasn't around people. So, if I wasn't going to catch any illness from anyone. And so that was kind of my, all I thought about when I sat in the hospital is reading the outdoor magazines, watching outdoor videos, like all I could do to get back out there. And that was the thing that helped push me to keep going every day.
That's awesome. So you spent the next kind of 20 years getting after it, building your career, hunting, living life. And then was it in your 40s when you started having issues with your, I guess, post-surgery issues and some of the prosthetics not performing the way it should? Is that when things started to change again for you, or how did that work?
No, there was always a post surgeries. There was always going to be a disability, right?
Yeah.
They did detach my calf. They cut half my quad out. I would never have the range of motion, flexibility, and strength in that leg that I once had. Um, for better intents and purposes, I mean, the doctors consider that leg handicapped
Hmm.
because of its limitations. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I couldn't go play hockey anymore. I can't go, run a marathon. I can't fully kneel on it, but the one thing I can do is I can do one step at a time, right? And that I am able to do. And so, sheep hunting is a game of steps. It's not
Hmm.
a game of athleticism. It is to some degree, but it isn't. I'm not leaping across rocks. So, it's something that I was able to do. So yeah, you have your challenges as you age and you're on a prosthetic. And that's why I had to have that second surgery done to replace the parts and to do some scar tissue cleanup. And my kneecap was deformed and they had to fix that. Um, and it took a little bit of time to recoup from that. Not as long as the first one. The first one was major trauma. The second one, I didn't have to do any major tissue surgery. It was more mechanical than anything. And so I was able to bounce back from that a lot quicker than the first surgery, um, and keep on doing what I was doing, right? And surprisingly, I haven't had any major issues with my knee or leg while on one of these hunts, because I'm always very careful. Now, if I took a big impact to it, I could certainly have a major issue. So I'm very methodical about how I approach the mountain and really take my time so I'm not being sloppy. I don't want to slip and overextend or, my ligaments and tendons are stapled to Teflon. They're not going to react like yours or somebody else with a normal leg that hasn't had that sort of injury. So, I always tell my guys before I go on these trips, I said, listen, I'm not going at your speed, and I'm not going to go at your speed, not because I'm not capable, because I don't want to get hurt. And this is my hunt, and we're gonna go at a pace that makes it enjoyable for me, and that doesn't put me at risk. So, um, and that just overall, I think, just sets the tone for a more enjoyable trip, and that you're on the same page.
Hmm.
And that's worked well for me. So, slow and steady
Yeah.
is the way I do it, and it works well. And I think that's also why you don't necessarily have to be um, in some crazy, incredible shape to do these trips. You just to be at the mindset to be uncomfortable, and when you're uncomfortable, to push through some of it. And if you're going slow at it and you take your breaks, yeah, it really at the end of the day isn't that tough. It really isn't, and it's just when I say embrace the suck, for a lot of it, it isn't embracing the suck of physical pain. I think it's really embracing the suck of things not going the way that you thought they were going to go, and that no matter how good your guide and how good an outfit is, or even if you do it yourself in a self-guided deal, it's just not going to be the way that you dreamed it up in your head. So,
Yeah.
there's going to be unfortunate circumstances that happen, and I've had them happen from, cutting yourself to getting bucked off horses to, whatever, like just shit happens, breaking guns. I mean, just that's the kind of stuff that happens, and you just have to deal with it. You have to, how to be adaptable. That
Yeah.
weather conditions. I've been snowed in the tent. And I've had to leave hunts because of it. It's just you just don't know what you're going to deal with.
Yeah, hey, you talk about things breaking. I was just telling my wife on my Dall sheep hunt, I was literally boarding the airplane to get, and when I say airplane, it was a small single engine airplane to fly
Hmm.
into the strip, and I'm glassing and looking at the mountains before we jump in, and my binos failed. One of the lenses like dropped; it just went black. You could, so I was like, when a monocular on the mountain with these binos, it was like
Yeah,
absolutely useless. So luckily, my buddy had a pair, and we were fine. But yeah, well said for sure. So
yeah,
now, Chad, let's talk about you said you were undergoing surgery again to get some rehab work done, and you're like, okay, I'm gonna do the hardest hunt that I can find in your mind at the time. I'm gonna book a sheep hunt. So let's talk about that journey. And I know you just achieved your finals and your slam here this year. Talk a little bit about sort of the steps in that. And was it
yeah.
always a goal to do your slam, or was it sort of that? Did you kind of like no? Okay, now I'm going to go for this, and then eventually you just ended up there. So talk about that journey for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the first sheep hunt, the bug gets you want to do the slam.
Mm.
Now, I would tell you that before I even finished my first sheep hunt, that just kind of became more of the goal around, the what I wanted to do with the television program and whatnot was to do the slam and to be able to hunt all four species. I think you learn once you start doing it that it isn't that easy, and then when you throw in the dynamic of trying to produce a television show, um, you're trying to get content that can kind of change the let's call the order of what you do things, and how long it's going to take to do it. So, um, when I first started out was Dall sheep hunt. You think everybody typically starts with a Dall sheep for the first sheep hunt, and I did that first hunt in the Northwest Territories with at Nahanni Butte at the time with the Lancasters, um, and had a real enjoyable hunt. Um, that one with the helicopter, it makes it a little bit easier, not as much time packing as you would on traditional Alaskan hunt, which I would later do to get the full dynamic of the two different sheep hunts. So I did my first all sheep hunt in the NWT. Then the next year I went to Alberta on Bighorn, and wasn't successful on that. We went 3 weeks trying to find a legal ram, and just beat yourself up on the horses for 3 weeks, and we gave it all we could get, but we just couldn't find a legal ram. Um, and then the third year that I went, we did stone sheep in BC, and I got snowed into our tent and all the sheep blew off the mountain. We had a little later September hunt. Rode in 60 degrees. Next day, 2-3 feet of snow, never stopped snowing, and that was the story of the rest of the hunt. It was basically a bust. Um, so quickly was finding out there at my first three sheep hunts, I'm going 1 for 3, and it wasn't because I messed up. It was just because of Mother Nature. And so at that point, I'm understanding I'm going to have to go on a lot of these hunts to get to this slam, right? So then it really became on the TV show, it became about content. You can't go on a bunch of unsuccessful hunts. We were trying to tell a good story about the journey and the training and whatnot, but people do want to see harvests on the TV show. So, we started trying to go on more high probability hunts, and obviously bighorn and stone sheep are not high probability. So we ended up going on some more Dall sheep hunts. So I actually ended up doing two more Dall sheep hunts, another one in NWT, and then I had a backpack hunt in Alaska, and I was successful on both of those. And then I made it to Mexico on bighorn. And that's not, I mean, that's a high probability hunt. So I got a desert bighorn on my first try down in Sonora. Um, that's not an incredible, can't spit out. That's not an incredibly physical hunt, that one. So
Yeah.
we knocked that one out. And then it was really, stone sheep and bighorn. And so I was fortunate enough to get a tag for bighorn in BC. And I went up with Elk Valley bighorn, and was able to get a bighorn on that trip, and shot out just a monster. It was a 42 plus inch on the curl, unbroomed. I mean, it was just unbelievable. And a big Boone and Crockett. Not anything I was expecting. I'm just trying to get a respectable animal, and we ended up getting an absolute giant. And so that then just left the stone sheep hunt. And so at that point, I think I've been on 7 sheep hunts, and I had gotten 5 sheep. So the two early ones that we just didn't have an opportunity. And so a BC stone sheep hunt, I'm going for my second time. And I go up with Luke Vence. That's who I ended up getting my slam ram with. This one ends up being an operator error. After 8 days in the trip, we finally find a legal ram, and perfect broadside standing, not moving, 400-yard shot, and been sitting on him for 2 hours. And I shoot, and we don't even see where the bullet went. I shoot again, I don't even see where the bullet went, and it was just like total devastation. We don't know what happened. And my shooting, I practice. I'm a really good long range shooter, and we just couldn't figure it out. And I shot 3 days earlier. I shot a moose at 600 yards, and I had a 6.5 with me, and three shots in the heart at 600 yards. You knock that baby down, and we're like, we don't know how I miss this sheep at 400 yards. And so we mope around back to camp, and we actually pulled camp at that point because the weather was kind of bad, and we went down to hunt off the river, and we shot the gun down there at camp, and it was 6 inches high at 100 yards, and we're like, how is this even possible? And I didn't figure this out until we got back home. But the bolt in the forearm of my gun came loose. And so it changed the compression on the float of that barrel. So it basically released it up. So it basically, you lose your zero up. And I couldn't believe it. I was so pissed. Now every one of my bolts and my that fasten the stock to the gun, I Loctite the shit out of them. Because I'm like, how does this happen? And now I'm super paranoid. I got an Allen wrench. I check them like twice a day to make sure those bolts in the forearm aren't loose. And I just missed the thing because of it. And but I wasn't letting that happen. So I went redemption. I waited 2 years between trips before I could get back up to hunt with Luke again, and we were able to get it done this time. So I think it was we had a weather delay, some issues getting in, but I think we killed that ram on the 5th day of hunting, like the 7th day of the trip, and no problems. Found him bedded and in a windy spot. It was kind of funny in this ram because we watched 2 big rams we wanted a better look at the day before go over the top of the mountain across from us. And so we went around that next day. We rode 4 hours in and hiked up to a good vantage point. We couldn't find any sheep. So we're like, we know there's something up there. Let's just hike up there. And this wind's blowing like 30 miles an hour up there. So we just keep walking. And Luke didn't even see the ram because he was stuck in this ditch. And as soon as we were walking, he jumps up out of the ditch. He's like 20 yards from Luke. When he runs up, I'm like yelling, "Luke, he's right there!" And we jump down, and it ended up being a completely different ram than the ones we were looking for before. It was just a lone ram, and he wasn't spooked by us. I don't know if he'd ever seen a human before. He just went up about 100 yards and laid down, and got us a chance to get the tripod and make sure he was legal, and he was legal. So. We sat on him for a while and just, we had to whistle and make some noise to get him to stand up because it was so windy. Finally did, and I just anchored him right there. It was only like 200 yards, so it was pretty close shot. And that was the slam ram. So it was 9 years in the making, I guess.
Wow.
So was that eight sheep hunts and No, nine sheep hunts and six were successful. Twice on the stone, or three stone sheep hunts and two bighorn hunts to get the stone and the bighorn. But but nonetheless, that's part of the process, right? It was awesome though.
So when you think back and you think of all that you've been through, you would think about the journey that you had the cancer when you were in your teens, and then you had your surgery, your rehab surgery, and then you had all these hunts. Um, what sort of sticks out in your mind? Like, is there a specific hunt that sticks out? Does the cancer stick out? Does the show stick out? What when you think about what you've gone through and your experience through all this, what sort of is front of mind for you?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many highlights to all of it, and not just. I mean, when I say highlights, maybe just memorable moments, because sometimes the lowest the lowest time, the lowest point, and some of the worst times are some of the highlights, right? Those are the areas where you saw that you had to dig deep and really power through it, and I think that some sick reason that's what keeps you coming back is like the fact that you're able to do that, and you don't. I don't think every time I don't think every sheep hunter or anybody who does these tough hunts gets into situations where like, I can't believe I paid to do this, like this is miserable.
Yeah.
And but then you're so quick to do it again.
Mhm.
And I think that there's very few, like for me, a busy professional that's just so distracted and moving so fast all the time, that my time in the mountain is precious, and it's like the only time that I have that I can truly disconnect, and that everything that's going on, your senses, your awareness, how focused you have to be, the struggles that you're going through on the mountain, nothing else can matter. You can't. That stuff has to just, you have to leave that back at the float plane hangar, or the or wherever you want to leave it. You got to leave it somewhere, and that baggage doesn't matter on the mountain, and it's just you and the mountain, and that's when I had created the TV show. I made that slogan, "Fear no mountain," and you know that was really the mindset of just the general attitude that I felt you had to possess, is that I couldn't be afraid of any obstacle, no matter how big it was, and the mountain gives that to you. It gives you a challenge that it doesn't matter who you are. You've got to learn how to adapt and overcome it. And I think that's just been for me over this last decade of getting into sheep hunting and coming and overcoming the obstacles from cancer. It really just kind of become the way I live and everything that I do. And don't sweat the little shit. Just don't. It doesn't matter. Stay focused and and take one step at a time, man, and you'll get through it.
So obviously very goal oriented yourself as an individual. You beat cancer. You've persevered with these challenges with a disability. You've gone 9 years to achieve your FNAS. You've done all these things. Is it is this something that you push yourself all the time? Is it just who you are as an individual? Just trying to get a frame of reference or is it just that mentality, one foot in front of the other, just go out and do it, and you're going to get there. I guess what I'm saying is, you obviously set a goal to get your FNAS. At one point, you said, "Okay, go on the sheep hunt," and then eventually turn into the show, and then eventually the FNAS. But was that always in the back of your mind, or was it sort of an evolution of just because you talk lots about one foot in front of the other, right? You talk lots about
Mm-hmm.
that, but then you also talk about having these goals, creating a vision of what you want to achieve.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the best analogy to really kind of put it in perspective is, if you're goal oriented, task oriented, it's like to be successful even in these mountain adventures, you have to have some level of being able to break things down in detail and having some plan of action. You're going to
Yeah.
have curve balls, but if you stay to your plan and you you're going to be able to continue, and you stay focused on it, you're going to continue to move in that direction. Um, so, I'm a checklist detail guy, and I attack that from, my personal aspects of my life to business aspects of my life. And that is, lay out the objective and the plan and break it down into smaller pieces and then tackle it one thing at a time. And, each win builds momentum. So, and I believe that in anything that I do in my hunting journeys to personal and business is, you know, if you focus on the little wins to get you to the big wins, and that little wins build momentum to get the big wins. And it's not about wins so much, but I personal wins, wins over struggles, wins over obstacles, it's, that just keeps you headed in the right direction. And, that's just the attitude that I've taken. Yeah. Listen, you're going to be down in the dumps sometimes in life, on hunts, on whatever, because you get dealt some punches that you just didn't like. But you got to be able to figure out how to take them and how to, how to get back up and just keep going,
Mm-hmm.
So life gives you those punches. It's just the way it works. Those that are happy in life or those who are successful in life figure out how to deal with that.
Yeah, right on.
So,
Okay, so if you're to sort of impart your knowledge and words of wisdom on those that are coming in behind you in your footsteps, whether it be your fanaz or just maybe your first sheep hunt, or maybe it's a guy that or gal that's just found out that they're dealing with a pretty serious cancer period, let alone a serious one. It's just, is the advice the same for those groups of people? Are they very different? Are these experiences kind of similar in many ways in terms of dealing with that adversity and overcoming the challenges to get where you need to go?
Yeah, I mean, they are, one of the things in the last handful of the years, I mean, I've always taken people on these trips. I mean, the show was about me, taking people on trips. But I've done a lot more of my hunts post TV show, really trying to bring people along with me. So, trying to get new people to experience some of these mountain adventures. Like the trip I just went on, I took 5 guys with me on that trip and their first big mountain hunting adventure, like really trying to prepare them mentally for these, physical is one thing, and I can tell a guy how to prepare physical, but preparing mentally and in a different way than what they would have going into it naive. Like I went into my first hunts, nobody helped me. I didn't know. I had to learn from trial and error. But if you can help prepare somebody for those trips, they're going to be much more enjoyable early on without a lot of those same mistakes that I would have made. And I think that frame of reference of embracing the suck, to know what you're signing up for. Like I've been on these trips with guys that all they're going to do is complain and bitch about them because they're tough and this isn't going right or that's not going right, and they just got to get that out of their head. That's the way these things are. If they go into it thinking that everything's going to be sugar coated, like they're going on the wrong kind of trips. Because this is wild shit. This isn't staying in a lodge and, getting driven by a truck out to your deer stand. This is, anything can happen. A bear can charge your horse. The horse could buck you. The horse could decide it's having a bad day. You're on foot, your backpack strap breaks, you drop your gun and it doesn't work anymore. Like these things are going to happen on these trips. And you could have spent $50,000 to $100,000 on a trip and you do that and your hunt is screwed. Like you got to understand these things can happen. And you got to accept it and embrace it. And I think that really just trying to get people in that mindset helps them with overcoming some of the things on these trips. And it makes it more enjoyable. Like you can have an enjoyable trip if it's about the journey and it's about the adventure and it's not about, going, mistake free or going without a hiccup or going with, with getting an animal every time, or you got to be doing it for the right reason. And so like that's why I really try to prepare a lot of the guys that are going on these things for the first time. People that are going through different, life challenges, whether it's an illness or an injury or, loss of a loved one or whatever hard times you're going through in life. I mean, my advice is the same as anything that I went through, and that's just one day at a time, one step at a time. You're going to get through it. It's you got to find an objective to work towards to keep your head out of the gutter. You got to. It's tough for people sometimes to be positive of when they're in very difficult situations, and so you got to figure out a way to just embrace that grind to get through it, and it not be enjoyable, but that you can do it and you can keep your mind on track. So one day at a time. Anybody I run into that's ever having challenges in any space in life, especially ones that have been through similar circumstances to mine, like, they don't got anybody, I'll be there for them. You got somebody you need to talk to, or you just need somebody to vent to, or you just want some advice, or you want to know how I got through it, or, always kind of open that channel and let them bend my ear on those things. Sometimes you just need somebody, right? So, always try to help in that arena where I can. But, again, on the advice side, it's going to be the same that I give them when I'm talking to you. It's that, one step, one win at a time. Just getting up out of bed is a win. The next day, do a little more. The next day, do a little bit more. And eventually you build that momentum and you pull yourself out of that rut.
Mm. And is that kind of the same? So you talk, if we just segue back to the hunting aspect of it, you talked about expectation settings, right? People have these unrealistic expectations of what the hunt is, that they're not expecting certain elements of it. So, but once they're out there, and you talked about these 5 guys that you just had out there with you, what are you telling them on the hill? Like, you're on the mountain and guys, and you probably I've seen it where I've lost guys. I've had guys just say, I'm done. Like, I'm absolutely done. Yeah. And you talk them through and you get them to sort of, and then, the one guy he did fly out. He was done. He was just, I'm out of here. And that's fine. It does happen. But how do you get guys through that on the mountain? And have you had that where you're losing guys, you can see it, and then you talk them through it? Have you had that experience on the mountain?
Yeah. I mean, not necessarily the quitting part. I've had, people get injured where it wasn't really able to finish. Whether they, did something to their knee or whatever the case was that just wouldn't allow them to go up the mountain. But, I've seen guys in camp that I've been at that have quit. And you get a mixed bag on those. Was it a mental, or was they rightfully not really should have been on the mountain? And I've seen both. I've seen guys that showed up that you knew as soon as they showed up, like, this guy's not going to make it a day. Because they came in completely out of shape, to the degree that they weren't going to walk 100 yards up. So, I think you got to be smart about it, and I wish some outfitters would probably be a little bit more transparent with some of these clients so that they at least had a chance. There's some folks that I've seen show up at sheep hunts that you're like, what are you doing here? You're going to be miserable, or you're going to quit. I don't say this to them, but you just I can sense it. And I always, and every single time my intuition has been right. You see somebody show up and they're 100 pounds overweight and they don't have the right gear, whatever. And you're just like, man, I feel bad for them, because like they just needed maybe some better coaching or whatnot before they signed up for what they were signing up for. Because there aren't trips that are the faint of heart, right? And I definitely tell my friends that I'm taking on these trips. I'm like, I'm going to just tell you the way it is. Like, you're going to get up and walk on places that you don't want to walk, and you're going to look down and you're going to like, if I slip, I'm going to die. And, you just can't think about that. You just got to keep your eyes focused where you're going, and it's one step at a time. And you just do it. You got to be smart. Don't put yourself in unnecessary situations if there's a better way. But yeah, you're going to ride your horses across some thin stuff. You're going to hike across some stuff that, you got to be careful. And, you can't be nervous in those situations. You got to be able to handle that. Like, so that's what I'm saying. These trips aren't for everybody.
Mhm.
If you can't overcome that, it's not just about physical, it's also about, embracing certain fears when you get put in those situations. Put 100 pounds on your back and go down something steep with it getting dark and being exhausted, and getting into some areas that look a little sketchy. Like, you better have some nerves. You can't break down. You got to get down. You got to get off the mountain. So I try to just forewarn the guys that before they get into it, to say, look, there's certain places, certain kinds of hunt based upon what you're willing to deal with, and there are areas that you can go sheep hunting in that aren't as rough and nasty as others. And so you just try to make them understand what they're signing up for. Going on your very first sheep hunt and it being a pure backpack hiking in 30 miles, like, that may not be what you want somebody to do for their very first one. Maybe get them some horses on that first trip. You know, so those are things that I learned lessons on as I went on these trips. But being very anal about the details, I also asked a lot of questions.
Right.
Or I love all the outfitters. I mean, and some of them are good friends, but they lack in the detail side. And I think a lot of it because of their communication, where they live and whatnot, aren't like what we're dealing with in the city. And it's not as easy to get all the details you want, you know, and so I think a lot of guys go into these trips unprepared because they weren't detailed either. And
Hmm.
they show up and they're missing gear, or they didn't prepare quite the right way, or had certain expectations or whatever. But so I'd always remain over research it, over ask questions, talk to guys that are very experienced that have done it, over and over. Get their packing list, ask them questions on that, double, triple check, pack 10 times, unpack, like, get it dialed in before you do these trips. Don't show up at the airport and your stuff's way overweight, bring in a bunch of crap you don't need. Like, just do your homework. And I think doing your homework and being obsessive over the details are going to help you be very successful on these trips.
Mm. Yeah.
And then overall, just the mentality that we've talked about. You've
Right.
got to have that mentality um, to overcome it.
Yeah. Awesome. All great advice. I'm curious now for you, what's next? So you've spent 9 years. You've got, nine sheep hunts. You've got,
Yeah.
your four North American wild sheep. What's on your honey-do list next? What's your bucket list next?
Yeah, I mean, I've been chipping away at it. I mean, over those 10 years, I was also going on other big game hunts. So, um, I don't necessarily have a goal to finish the North American 28, 29, or whatever it is now. But there were certain bigger ticket items on there that, I've wanted to do my whole life. The bear hunts were always a big deal. And the moose but I've really just had a passion for Africa. I just love going over there. And I've been trying to go every year, and so I'm going again next year. I booked a trip to Mongolia because now that I'm done with the North American sheep, I'm starting to concentrate on some of the other international goat and sheep. So I've got a Mongolian trip booked. I've got another trip back to Alaska to brown bear hunt again. But really, those trips, I'm just not focused on like me trips anymore. I'm really trying to put together trips that other friends uh, really want to do. And so I'm kind of with a different couple different groups of friends that we like to hunt together. Trying to put together some bucket list trips that we can all go on together versus just be my journey. And I just find it way more enjoyable when I got a whole, whether it's two guys or four or five guys to go on these adventures with, and really trying to cater to setting those up so we can do them together. So we'll keep planning some more, but those are some of the ones that I got upcoming.
Right on. That's exciting. Um, I got to ask you this. Gunworks is one of our conservation partners, a great sponsor. I know
Hmm.
you talk about when you took your slam that you did it, all four of them with your Gunworks.
Yeah.
Was that a brand sponsorship through Sheep Fever, or like obviously you believe in the product as I do, but
Yeah.
how did that relationship form for you, Chad?
Yeah, it was because of the show. Aaron Davidson, I didn't know Gunworks at all. I'd reached out to them, cold called them in a sense, and you know, and really just I started to build a relationship with them, and he was very interested in the concept of sheep shape and what I was doing, and so they were one of my first sponsors, and they sponsored this show through its entirety, and I've continued to work with those guys and buy their guns and send all my friends there to buy guns, and yeah, I mean, I love their product, and continue to use it on all these trips.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, very innovative, great product. Did you say you used your 6.5 for the stone sheep? I know you said you on the moose. Did you use it for the stone sheep as well?
Yeah, I did. I used a 6.5 PRC on this trip. I go back and forth. I really like the 7 millimeters. I own a lot of the different 7 millimeters that they've made over the years. They've had that long range Magnum, and they're really pushing that 7 PRC. One of my sheep shape guns they built me was a 6.5 284 Norma, and then into the 7 LRM, because I had started with a 7 rim mag. Then it was a 6.5 284, and then the 7 LRM. Then I got into the 6.5 PRC. I still use all of them. 6 PRC has kind of been the good one. I had them build me they at one point they had run this gun called Lightsaber, and it was a foldable gun, foldable. And that's the ticket. It's got that XLR chassis stock on it where you can fold it.
Right,
I mean, it's the best backpack gun because you can stick the whole thing in your backpack.
right. Yeah,
So that thing, I've been trying to use that on most of these backpack hunts. That there's something about being able to sit down with your backpack on and not worry about your gun.
yeah,
And just makes it nicer on the horses too.
yeah,
You fold that gun in half and you don't have much of a horse scabbard.
yeah, yeah.
Um, so that was cool. But
Yeah.
yeah, so Gunworks is awesome. I still go to their shooting schools. I try to take, some of my friends that haven't bought the guns before. I do get them set up in a gun, and we'll go do a shooting school with the Gunworks guys. And then after that, they're usually hooked.
Yeah. Yeah. Right on. Yeah. Great product, great company, great people for sure. Great products for sure. So,
Yep.
okay, cool. I know I've taken a bunch of your time here. It's dinner time in Florida. Before we let you go, anyone who wants to check you out, best places, I guess YouTube and obviously Instagram. Can you get some handles for us that people can check you out on?
Yeah, my Instagram's at Chad Real Wild. I don't any other social media. I kind of discontinued those TV, but all the old Cheap Shape episodes are on YouTube. And yeah, I'm sure I'll be trying to make some more videos and stuff in the future.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you so much. And we got to try and get you up to BC here and hang out for one of our shows. I'd love to have you up. Unfortunately, our shows are right smack dab in the middle of all the big shows down south. So it's always a tough time trying to get you guys up here for them. But I'd love to have you up here in British Columbia. And yeah, we're really excited to see you get that stone sheep. So congrats again on all your achievement. Thank you so much for being on the show. And yeah, thank you for all you do for the things that we all love, wild sheep and wild places. So
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thanks for the time.